Interpersonal students, Mrs. Roth here, and I'm going to walk you through part 2 of chapter 4 notes. And chapter 4 is intercultural communication. So intercultural communication is really focused on communicating, with people who are from different cultures. So people who are different than you. The first step to really being good at intercultural communication is understanding your own culture and your own communication. And we talked about your own culture and what culture is and your examples of your own culture in part 1 of notes. And today we're going to try to move on and then talk about people who are different than you. So a little review from yesterday. We talked about culture. We talked about examples of your own culture. Okay, and today we're going to focus on how are we different, part 2 of chapter 4 notes. Okay, so communication researchers have studied several main differences that affect how we interact with each other. Some of the differences contribute to diversity. Some of them interfere with the relationships that you have. Some of them affect relationships and interpersonal communication. And here's several of the categories that the researchers have found. And you're probably going to recognize these and already kind of know what they are. And I would argue that there's more than just these categories as well. Notice your notes guide says you don't have to copy all of these over, but just copy a couple down to kind of remind yourself what the different categories are. Okay, so the first category, race, is a person's physical appearance, skin color, eye color, bone structure. The second one is ethnicity, and those are cultural factors like nationality, language, beliefs, geographical origin. Sometimes people believe that race and ethnicity are the same thing, but they're different. Ethnicity is more of pointing to a place on a map, and race is more like taking a photograph and looking at somebody's outward appearance. Sexual orientation, this refers to your sexual identity and the gender to which you're attracted. Age, this is talking about like generational. So maybe somebody like your grandma, when talking to your grandma, there's differences between you and that generation that can sometimes challenge communication. Social class, this is talking more about like economic issues. Abilities, this could be physical abilities or mental abilities. Spirituality, this is your religious beliefs or your choice to not believe in religion. And all of these things can be different in groups of people and sometimes can affect communication. Okay, the next term that you need to know is discrimination, and discrimination is unfair or inappropriate treatment of people based on their group membership. Okay, so you can discriminate on anything. You can discriminate for somebody because they belong to the chess club. You can discriminate against somebody because they belong to the football team. You can discriminate against somebody because they have blonde hair. You can discriminate because of somebody having black hair. You know, there's a lot of different reasons that people experience discrimination, but a lot of them will include those categories that we just talked about, right? So race and ethnicity and age and social class, and I would add gender, right? So a lot of times the differentness or the otherness is what somebody will experience discrimination around. Now, what are some barriers to communication? So if you are going to communicate with somebody different than you, what are those things that make it difficult? Okay, well, the first thing is ethnocentrism. All right, this can get in the way. We talked about what ethnocentrism is in part 1 of the notes, but it's this idea that we're better than others and that we're the best, and anybody who is like us is also the best. So I'm part of the awesome group, and anybody who seems like they're like me is also awesome. But everybody else who seems different or other, we don't trust them. We don't really like them. Okay, that's ethnocentrism. Number 2 is different communication codes or languages is another easy way to think about this for number 2. When you encounter people who do not speak your language, that can be a barrier to communication. So how are you going to get your messages across if you're not speaking the same language? Well, sometimes it takes a little creativity. Sometimes it takes nonverbals. Sometimes it takes translations. You're able to do it, but it can be difficult if you're not speaking the same language. Here's some interesting examples related to language, and these are really related to translation. They're kind of fun little facts here. So Pepsi's slogan, "We bring you back to life," caused a bit of panic in China, where they translated it as "We bring your ancestors back from the grave." So it's kind of funny to think about drinking a can of Pepsi and grandma's going to pop out of the grave. And also KFC opened their first restaurant in Beijing in 1987, and they accidentally translated KFC's slogan from "finger looking good" to "we'll eat your fingers off" in Chinese, right? So can you imagine a new Cane's restaurant opening up or something, and they're like, "Come on in, we're going to bite off your fingers." That's just kind of odd, okay? So definitely some problems with communication based on language and translation. There can also be barriers to communication based on nonverbals. So cultures don't communicate only through words. Cultures also communicate through nonverbals. And just like we looked at some nonverbals when we were studying social norms, every culture has their own sense of normal, okay? So when you greet somebody, how do you greet them? Do you shake their hands? Well, not during COVID times, right? How do you greet somebody? And do we greet people the same way in America as they do in Germany, as they do in Mexico, right? Every culture has their own social norms centered around nonverbals, things that you do to show friendship and things that you do to show anger. You use a different set of nonverbals. And not only that, but even within our own culture, you can have subcultures. So, things like gestures, eye contact, spatial relations. I'm thinking of maybe people with military background. They maybe have nonverbals that mean different things to them. So like posture and having good posture and good eye contact and being very timely for appointments might be more important to them based on their past experiences and their perception, right? So nonverbals can play a role in cultural communication and can also be a barrier. Some more examples here. Americans consider eye contact honest, but in Japan, they often view it as a lack of respect. Americans hold up two fingers to like make a V. This could be like peace, right? But in South America, if you hold up two fingers like a V, it would be like flicking somebody off. In China, the color red means prosperity and rebirth. It's like a festive kind of a thing. But in Japan, it can mean anger and danger. Or specifically in the subculture of Korean Buddhists, you only use the color red to write a person's name at the time of their death or on the anniversary of their death, but that's the only time you use the color red. So those are some more examples of nonverbals and how they could get confusing. Number 4 is stereotyping and prejudice. This is putting somebody in a category as a result of interpreting or labeling behaviors. It's kind of like picking up on one little thing and then making a big set of assumptions, kind of like the horn effect that we studied in our perception unit. And we don't necessarily intend to, but oftentimes we judge and we label, and it seems kind of innocent, but it's not innocent, and often it's very hurtful. So examples could be like trying to tell like a joke. Like, have you heard a joke about X and X, the minister and the rabbi, or the whoever and the whoever? And you're trying to be funny. You're not trying to be hurtful, but it is hurtful, right? Or having little nicknames like trailer trash or blue hair. Or I can think of some slang names that people get called of other races that are not classroom appropriate, right, to say in the video. But you can think of how people get name called. Sometimes you make overgeneralization, like all women are bad drivers. Okay, well, you might know a woman who's a bad driver, or you might know more than one bad woman who's a, quote, bad driver, but you can't make an overgeneralization to everyone. Sometimes calling somebody out and asking them to speak on behalf of an entire group, like, hey, Eric, what do Hispanic people think about this? Well, how is he supposed to know what all Hispanic people think, right? You don't have one person talk for an entire group. And then on the bottom again is like a comparison or an overgeneralization again, like all men are insensitive, right? Something kind of like that. So those are all examples connected to stereotyping and prejudice. Number 5 is assuming. Sometimes it can get in the way of good communication if you just assume. So you see somebody dresses differently than you, so you assume that they speak a different language, or you see somebody is wearing a t-shirt on the same sports team that you like, so you assume they support the same political candidate as you, right? Anytime you're assuming differences or assuming similarities without really having the information to back that up, you're going to make a danger of communicating in a way that could be hurtful or that could cause some type of conflict. So as much as possible, you want to try to get to know somebody. And the other thing you want to do is to accept the ambiguity. So kind of understand that you don't know that person, and don't try to label them or judge them or figure them out just on first appearance. Try to accept the fact that I don't know them, and I'll try to get to know them, and I'll try to get to know who they are as an individual. And we already talked about some examples of assuming. Here's a couple more. Assuming people like the same political candidates, or assuming people like different food than you because they speak a different language or something kind of like that. So if we ended it there, it would be pretty depressing. Hey, we're all different and communicating can be hard. But here's the silver lining, is that you can get better at communicating with people from a different culture, and it can be more comfortable, and you can get more efficient, and you can do it in a more open and helpful way with practice and intention. Okay, so how can we get better? Number one is you can develop knowledge. So by trying to learn more about people who are different than you, like reading books, watching movies, asking questions, embracing new experiences, trying new restaurants, going, spending time in places you wouldn't normally spend, like being observant, trying to add to your knowledge level, that can definitely help, right? Because it gives you an opportunity to connect with somebody over something you wouldn't normally know anything about. Number two is trying to reduce ethnocentrism. So try to become aware of the illogic that's in your head. Try to become other people orientated. Try not to always assume that you're first or best. Try to be like, oh, they're different, interesting, right? Or, oh, they're different, cool, right? So try to approach it with a neutral or positive mindset. Number three is increasing mindfulness. So try to become aware of what you're thinking and sensing. Sometimes we encounter that stereotype and that prejudice, and we don't even realize it. So try to watch the jokes that you make or laugh at. Try to be aware at some of the judgments that you're making in your mind, and then try to purposefully create positive beliefs and attitudes. Number four is confronting stereotypes. So either stereotypes in your own mind, or if you hear other people apply stereotypes, it takes more courage, but standing up to them and kind of pointing out their microaggressions or the things they're doing to kind of belie the way their minds are thinking. And then number five is adjusting your communication. Okay, so trying to go out of your way to adapt how you send and receive messages with that other orientation in mind. So if you need to speak with somebody who doesn't speak your language, how can you communicate with them? How can you go out of your way to try to make connections and try to be other orientated in the way that you send and receive information? Okay, so those are 5 tips. Takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of practice, but the more you do them and have that courage to go out there and try something new, the easier it gets. And that's the end of part 2, chapter 4 notes. If you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, thank you.